I'm going to go live. I'm not going to end meeting. I'm going to go live. Live on custom.
Are we going live? Here we are.
All right, Randy, go do your magic on social media, buddy, because welcome to Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. For those who don't know, I'm the Teddy, and the guy on the left or right or top or bottom for me is Randy. Our special guest today is Robin Reshwan.
Good job.
I'm trying to get it right, Robin. I'm trying to do like Dale Carnegie taught me and do it right. It's Randy and I get together every Wednesday at 11:55 a.m. You can join us 11:55 a.m. in the green room where we answer any question you throw at us. And today, Robin's going to engage in conversations with us that I can guarantee you'll get value from. Let me tell you a little bit about me. Randy will tell you a little bit about him, and then we'll talk about our guests. I work for a company called Burriss Consulting. We're primarily LinkedIn strategists, trainers, and coaches teaching Sales Navigator and LinkedIn. We're also building a new division of the company that goes live in 2022, where we will teach Google Workspace and Gmail as business tools. Whole new adventure that I'm really excited about. And so that's who I am and what I do. Randy, would you do us a favor and introduce yourself to our guests?
You bet. Not operating from the palatial estate today, but instead from the office at work, at corporate. So I work for Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, and am the director of our professional center. So as you might expect, people like those who are on the call and those that will watch us later on LinkedIn and YouTube and elsewhere. I help professionals through a job search. Our services are free and we work by appointment. And I have clients in California, so all over the continental U.S. and including, Teddy, for the first time in a long time, international. I have a new international client. So,
Yadkinville?
K Vegas, baby. But I digress, but no, seriously, we're happy to help. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm all over the internet. You can find me. I tell people, look, if I ever robbed a bank, I would never get away with it because it's all over the internet. But hey, by the way, let us know where you're watching from today and also what you're having for lunch. I'm always curious about that, just to have a little fun with it. And also, if you do have comments or questions for our guest, and we have a great topic today, by the way, and Teddy will get into that here in a little bit. If you have questions or comments for Robin, please put them in the chat box, and where appropriate, we'll work those into today's conversation. Teddy?
So our special guest today is all the way from the other coast, that would be the West Coast, Robin Reshwan. And Robin is a career strategist. I love the way she thinks. It's all about strategy and executing your strategy. Primarily focused on executives, but also serving lots of different populations. She's founder and a CEO of an organization called CS Advising. And again, she's from California. And rather than me butcher introducing you, Robin, would you do us a favor and tell our audience who you are, please?
Absolutely. And again, kudos twice on getting the name correct. I blame my husband. I like him very much, but his name is very tricky for many people. So it's a pleasure to be here today. I have, more than 2 decades really in the careers industry. So my roots are in recruiting. So I started as a recruiter in Texas and then became a manager and then a regional manager. And then my expertise became starting specialty staffing lines in very large companies like Robert Half or Adecco. So really, I've had offices and worked with teams throughout the US and Canada in pretty much every type of function. So tech, creative, marketing, accounting, finance, administrative, legal, in those areas. And so eventually, after starting businesses for large companies, I started my own brands. It's been about 11 years. So the career coaching piece was near and dear to my heart because at that time, I didn't see it on a larger scale and really believed firmly that so many people have the right to an excellent career, but don't necessarily know how to manage the optics of what's necessary to get a new job, as well as the intentionality around, what do they want to do and how to pursue it. So that was the impetus behind the career coaching side. And then I still do run a national staffing company called CS Search and Staffing. So the relevance, I think, whenever I talk is that I'm not just talking from theory, I'm talking from what I see my hiring clients do. I also work with academic institutions, master's programs, MBAs, a full range to really try to get a 360-degree perspective of what the world of work is like for job seekers, as well as for the hiring authorities and everyone in between. So pleasure to be here today.
Hey, Robin, thank you. And by the way, I always ask the why question, but you've answered that. So I'm going to twist it just a little bit. I mean, job searching is not something that we necessarily take college classes in, or we don't just like sales. We don't major in sales. Maybe they offer that now, but so this is a learn as you go kind of a thing. And I guess, was there a point in your life where you were tired of getting beat up a little bit in the job search where you said, I need to up my game here or something like that? And how did that evolve to where you said, this is the industry that I feel like is something I can add value in?
Yeah. So something I realized later in life, I fell into recruiting. Right. I went to see a recruiter that was recommended to me by someone else when I was facing a job change, and it was just shortly after college. And I really liked her, and she said, "Hey, have you ever considered this industry?" And I said, "No." And I think I started a week later. So for me, staffing, it was not intentional; it was accidental. What I loved is it married the altruistic side of me that likes helping people, but also the very competitive piece of me that likes to go fast, wants to know I did a good job, and wants to do well. And so staffing was this perfect mix, because I did try doing more social service related work, and it was wonderful, but it didn't necessarily align with the pace that I was looking for. So again, happenstance, but kept saying yes to the career over and over again because I kept getting new and better opportunities.
Right.
The second piece to it is growing up. I grew up in Houston, and I had a father who was in the oil industry. And so in high school, all of our dads lost jobs, and most of them never recovered. So, when you think about, besides your family relations, how you feel about work is probably the second most important driver to how you feel as a person. And so I think that really stuck with me. And so while I didn't intentionally say I'm pursuing a career, I think that hope of I can help people not get caught up in if I'm not outwardly getting what I want professionally, then I'm going to judge myself differently. I wanted to be able to facilitate people being able to pursue their passions and to get those results in their work. And then the third piece I've always looked at as I've made transitions or in my work to say, am I my best defense in finding my next job? And if I don't think I'm my best defense, right? If I'm going, hey, I'd rather give my resume to Randy to help me out, or I'd rather give my resume to Teddy, then I need to up my game, right? So does it mean I'm not networking enough? Am I not clear enough on the value I can bring to a situation? Do I not understand what my targets are? So that's, and even today, right? The job seeking has changed tremendously. It just is much harder for job seekers. And so I think we're always needing to recalibrate, how am I going after this? Because the world of job seeking continues to evolve.
Yeah. I tell myself regularly, Robin, that hoping and praying is not a business tactic.
No.
and by the way, career transition and job search is a business role.
Yeah.
And nothing wrong with hoping and praying, but it better not be your primary tactic. Like, I'm gonna send my resume to Randy and hope and pray he finds somebody for me.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
I've heard that a million times.
So let's so Robin, when you and I were talking, we decided that we're going to title this conversation "Professional Transferable Value."
Mm-hmm.
That's a different statement.
That's right.
Everybody calls it transferable skills, but value is much more intentional. Could you help me define that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So in the world of work, companies are thinking about impact, right? So when they're looking at hiring someone, there's some general assumptions of, if you have a certain title, I'm assuming you're doing the things within that. But really, what are you like in motion? So what's the impact, the lasting value that each of us creates in our work? And so for most people, they don't have a strong handle on that. Most of us go to work and we try to do our best and we show up again the next day and so on and so forth. So we don't really take stock of how is this place better or different because I'm here? What am I bringing to this? And what am I continuing to strive to do? So when we talk about professional value, it's that emphasis on not just here's my duties, but what is different or impacted because I'm in this job as opposed to someone else.
Yeah. It's a huge mind shift when you use the word value versus I got this bucket full of skills.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So, often I think that we are more likely to be successful when we change our mind shift, when we shift our minds on these different things. Otherwise, we'll look like the same old duck that everybody else looks like, walking down the road trying to find that job. And that's not going to be as successful for you. So
absolutely.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. The whole idea of, how does this help us? How does this make us better? And whether or not we're in a job today or we're looking for a job, how does that shift really help us?
Absolutely. So the first thing, and it's an analogy I use all the time when working with clients, is you really want to think about employment as a marketplace, right? So the commerce aspect. So you're going and asking an employer to pay you salary dollars for you to contribute something back, right? So starting in that mindset, I think is important. And I even oftentimes remind people, because I think it's easy to become jaded when you're job seeking and not getting the responses you want. And I'll see people that start to go, and they're angry at recruiters or they're angry at companies. And so I'll say, let's start first with, let's say you're getting married and you want to hire someone to do your wedding cake. Are you going to hire someone who says, I really like making wedding cakes, but I've never done it before? Are you going to hire someone that's made 100 wedding cakes because you want to make sure nothing can go wrong? And so most people understand very innately that they're going to start first with, is there an expert who can come in and make those wedding cakes for me? However, if that expert's expensive, or they're looking for something creative, or if their next door neighbor that they adore and think highly of says, I've got to introduce you to Randy, because even though he doesn't always make wedding cakes, man, he has made some cakes and desserts for our party. And I think you're really going to like what he does. Or if an external person sends you a very compelling message to say, hey, here's what I can do for you, right? So it takes action from the other party to convince you that there's value in someone that doesn't already have a track record. And this is no different for each of us when it comes to work, which is, right, you want to enter the market recognizing someone is paying salary dollars for, first and foremost, if they can get it, a proven track record, but secondly, competencies that tell them that you're going to thrive and do great work. So to your point on mindset, right, that's how you really want to think about it. And if you think about it that way, what it does for you next is it gives you a level of accountability to say, well, wait a minute, let me really pause. What am I doing in my role or in my volunteer work that adds value? And so moving from, again, kind of tasks and responsibilities to, I'll give you an example. I have a client of mine who runs a hospitality program, and he works for large enterprises and will go and create sort of the food and beverage program for those companies. Now, what he did really well is he had a strong sense of the value he brought, right? So on paper, his title says food and beverage. Well, by assessing his value, which in his case was creating mission and vision, was enacting on it and getting people to buy in, he brought around transformational change in terms of how the organization looked at food and beverage. And then he had quantifiable results, right? So things that happened in terms of number of locations, profitability, number of hires. And so by assessing and packaging all of that, he actually was able to move into, now he works, with a chief of human resources for a Fortune 500 company doing transformational change, which you wouldn't think, right? Going from food and beverage, which we think more of, you're like a restaurant manager, to transformational change. But it was because he recognized the value he brought to an organization, was able to communicate it and advocate for it, and then move on. So that's just one instance. But as you think about it, it causes you, one, to take stock in what you're doing, but two, then you can be intentional and say, oh, wait a minute, right? Is there some areas where it's underwhelming? So now I can strive to develop and grow some of those skills.
Yeah.
Do you think, just curious, do you think that given the job market where it's difficult to find necessarily that exact round peg to put in a round hole, in this case, a food and beverage guy making that transition, do you think that companies or employers are more open to hearing the story beyond just, okay, I don't see it on this guy's resume, therefore he's out because we don't need a food and beverage guy, we need a change agent guy? Are companies more open to having those discussions? Do you get a sense for that?
So it's a yes and no. And I think Teddy and I might have talked about this a little bit. The challenge that everyone is facing right now is the proliferation of applicant tracking tools and searching algorithms. Yeah. Right. So we have this very weird world right now in which employers are saying, I can't find the people I want. And yet we have processes that only vet for the past, because an applicant tracking system, keyword searches, and matching algorithms can only go look for evidence of something that's already occurred. Right. So they can't think forward. So job seekers that are only relying on, I'm sending my resume out, very rarely can make any significant change, because unless they want to do more of the same, they won't rank very highly. And you know, a recruiter that's already super busy, if you get 500 applications, you're not reading all of them. You're starting with what got ranked most highly, and you're going through to fill your 6 interview slots, and you may never come back and look at the rest. So to your point, Randy, it is harder than ever before to have a stranger relationship and have them recognize you for potential and say, great, let's talk about it. But at the same time, if you couple, I see a job post with, I'm going to apply, but now I'm also going to send a message directly to the hiring manager, not the recruiter, because the recruiter's not incented to take a chance, but to the hiring manager to say, you know, hey, Randy, I recently applied to the transformational change role. I'm reaching out because on paper, you won't think I'm the right fit for you. And here's a few reasons why I think I would be. Would you be open to a conversation? Because that hiring manager is suffering from not getting the right people. And so, you know, we see more success from our clients that will do that than, you know, hey, I'm spraying my resume all over the place and, you know, spending hours trying to customize it. You still have to do that. But you have to combine it with outreach to the person who actually feels the pain by not having the right, you know, culture fit and competency fit. You know, so it's a 1-2 punch, if you will.
Yeah.
Did you get any pushback from HR that says, hey, wait a second, this guy went around me, went to the hiring official, and I feel like I'm getting pushed aside, and therefore, I don't want you. Do you get a sense that HR is off put somewhat by what they make term an end around?
Not as much anymore. And I remember, gosh, in early roots in staffing, you always had a fear of, you know, do I upset the HR person? In which case, you know, that they'll blackball or blacklist me from this whole company. And then, of course, you know, the company I worked with was more aggressive. So they're like, we don't ever go to HR. You just go straight to the person who owns the P&L, because at the end of the day, if they're happy with your candidates, you will, you know, find work there. Now, today. So now, because, you know, human resources and talent acquisition are so separate. And then secondly, because talent acquisition and recruiting is typically so busy, I don't hear very many instances where someone's feathers are ruffled because they feel like, you know, you didn't go through the protocol. And also that's why I'm a fan of apply online, right? So you're playing in the sandbox, but call attention to your candidacy. Yeah. So in other words, you're not sending a message to a manager saying, I ignored the fact you asked for me to apply online, but rather you're saying, I did that, but, you know, I want to throw my hat in the ring in case you're open for something, or, you know, in case you might miss it. And there's been so much research of when they go and analyze people that actually get hired, a lot of the time they actually didn't get through HR's processes. And it's not HR or talent's processes, and it's not talent's fault. Again, it means all those tools that were designed for efficiency and value management only vet for past. Yeah. And right, and if you think of any of us who wants to go back and do the same job over and over again, right? It's very underwhelming, and it's why I think people leave jobs at a faster clip. So it's a weird cycle.
Yeah, I use the phrase, when you said marketplace, don't think of job search as, job search. I got to, do these 10 steps 1,000 times to get a job. Thinking about it as you're in the market space. You've got a product to sell. So you have to do the steps that you would do to sell any other product. And one of the things is not just to simply put your ad out there, resume.
Yeah.
Next thing is to get the target audience to know who you are. Now, you could call the hiring manager or email the hiring manager directly, but another way to get your brand in front of that hiring manager or target audience is get a mutual connection to hook you up.
Yep.
That creates value every single time.
Yeah. A network will trump, you still have to be able to do the job. But if you can put a network connection in there, it's unbelievable. And I think, I was reading something, and it was authored by the gentleman who was the first chief people officer for LinkedIn. And so, he wrote a book about kind of modern views on talent, if you will. Yeah. And one of the things he emphasizes is, if you think about why you hear in technology, people moving from sort of one unicorn company to another, well, people that are thirsty and hungry for more, right? They're moving from one company, then they get recruited to another, and then they can bring people from their network with them. And so it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more they move, the more they pull people, the more there's jobs open, and you've got the swirl. So tech definitely has one of the strongest examples of where a network can trump anything, because I think I just saw some stat that in about, I think they were doing like 5 years out, 45% of the job titles they think people will have may be newly created. I mean, it was like some crazy number. Yeah. And I think about, I've got, kids that are teenagers and in college, and I remind them all the time that your job is to learn how to think and how to problem solve, because the actual job you're going to have, we probably don't know yet. Yeah. With the rate of technology. Right. So right as participants in the job seeking marketplace, you have to show competency and ability to do things, but don't have to necessarily have them in a box of a title, because those titles may change.
Absolutely. Hey, we've got a question I'll throw out here that one of our attendees, Lisa, had mentioned, but I think back years ago to a friend of mine who had to fill out, talking about, I think American Airlines, or one of the airlines anyway, as, a reservation person, right? Mm-hmm. And had worked there many years ago. And then they had some big layoffs. So this person had then taken on some other jobs in sales, but I think it was insurance or something. Anyway, it was not in the right industry. Mm-hmm. And then she went back to reapply for the job, the exact job she had maybe 20 years prior, 15 years prior. However, she'd had enough jobs in the interim to where on the application, and it says list your three most recent positions, none of them had anything to do with airlines. And so they said, rejected her as not qualified. And she had never occurred to her to reach out to her former coworkers, and all it took was a phone call, and that she was hired. But it's just, you don't know what you don't know. And I think to your point on this thing with Robin, as far as not reaching out to a networking person to put in a word, and it wasn't, hey, you got to hire this person. It was just take a look at her. And lo and behold, now looking at the resume, they saw, so the question, by the way, came from Lisa in the chat, and it's thoughts on how you can use transferable skills from accounting, so number crunching kind of thing, to once it's transitioned into product marketing, in this case, the food and beverage area. Are there certain buzzwords or things that you would rattle off to say, have you thought about these things, and this is how you might go about that?
Sure. And it's a great question. And you're, and definitely not the typical path, right? So I think there's many bridges. So we think about stakeholders, right? So are you interacting with similar stakeholders in job one to job two? We think about industry. So for example, and I don't know if you're doing accounting in a food and beverage or hospitality company. And so you're used to looking at how the revenue comes in that way. There's the actual way companies are formatted, right? So are you in, when you think about food and beverage, is it food and beverage in terms of we're thinking about multiple SKUs, or is it service focused, right? So the industry. Sometimes it's geography. So Maybe you're lucky and you happen to be in a smaller town. We see that a lot. In our case, Reno is a town closer to Tahoe, but it's a very small community. So sometimes people can make bigger shifts because they know the Reno market, and that's important. And then you can break down what you're looking at in product marketing, so a specific role, and say, okay, so what are the underlying competencies? So now let's think about this. So in accounting, because there's a lot of different accounting roles, there's definitely a number sense. And in product marketing, there is a number sense as well, right? Because we're thinking about costs, we're thinking cost of campaign, we're thinking of if we put a campaign out there, what type of results are we getting back? So your number sensibility, I think, is of value. In your accounting role, do you do presentations? Do you have to build consensus among multiple stakeholders? Do you, sometimes accounting, you're partnered with different departments. So maybe you do a lot of work with the marketing department. Maybe you see marketing budgets. Maybe some of the vendors or partners that your company might work with. These could all be leverage points that you can think about. And then I also look for, proximity. So I always tell people, you're thinking about concentric circles. So when you start thinking of moving to product marketing, are there companies maybe before food and beverage that might be a more natural step? So, let's say you're in one industry, could you stay within your industry and move more toward marketing? And then once you have some product marketing experience, use that to leverage in food and beverage, right? So in many things, there might be those multiple steps. And then of course, adding in additional training or certifications and making sure you're displaying knowledge in this area. So whether it's, going to conferences, following, certain thought leaders in the space, right? You want to show you have a capacity to learn and grow, and you're paying attention to what's going on in product marketing, specifically within food and beverage. So, that's a very surface level, but really I look at it like, let's break down all these places where there might be ties, where there might be advantages. And then let's also identify what is necessary and look and say, can we find evidence of that in your current role? And then reframe it using terminology related to the market you're going to. So it doesn't mean, and I want to add a note here. I know sometimes, I'll see people that will say, oh, I need a resume that's going to beat the ATS, or I need to put keywords in here. The goal never is to put a smattering of things that you don't know about in your resume. Any
Now
good
you
recruiter,
tell us, right?
Exactly. Any good recruiter can sniff that out. So the key is to say, for example, like in my line of work, whenever we're starting to work with a staffing client, we'll have a, what I'd say is like a needs assessment meeting where I'm trying to understand what they do. But then with some of my tech clients, they'll call that a kickoff meeting. So the shift I'd make is if I was trying to represent my skills to these companies, instead of saying, hey, I'm going to do a needs assessment with each department, I'm going to say, I'm going to do a position kickoff, right? It's those types of changes. So it shows I know their industry, and yet I can still describe what I do in a kickoff meeting. I didn't just make it up to get you to talk to me, right? So you want to be thoughtful about those pieces.
So you're telling me that I shouldn't be using smoke and mirrors when I'm trying to get myself in front of the right people.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so funny that, again, it's funny that people don't think about this other end that's going to be talking to you. They know what they're doing for a living as well. And they'll lose their job if they're being bamboozled and sending people on to their hiring managers. So yeah, I'm a firm believer you have got to be able to back up anything you put on your resume. Because you should always have in the back of your mind. And I've seen this before where like you'll get candidates that'll put French, and I've had managers that start speaking to them in French, and the candidate's like, oh, and the manager's perspective is, why did you bother putting it on there if you can't use it at work? Yeah. Right. So you got to own or be able to explain why anything you're putting out there is something that you're putting out there.
So Randy, you're going to change your LinkedIn profile now and take French out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, those eight languages, I guess I'll have to drop 7 of them. And
yeah, that's right.
Back
drop
to
them
English.
down to 2. Yes.
Hey, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Our special guest today is Robin Reshwan, and the conversations about showing your transferable value, which is far more important than showing your transferable skills. We get together every Wednesday at 11:55 a.m. to do this show. It's a lot of fun, and we bring lots of value to our job-seeking community, our business community, and our community as a whole. But don't leave before the end of the show, because at the end of the show, Robin is going to explain to us what she means by, can you show transferable value on a dating app?
And will it work?
You're not getting away with that one, lady. So this is good. This is good stuff. I really like this conversation because, again, it's a shift in the way we think. Yeah. And, there's lots of ways to show transferable value. You talked about it a little bit when the conversation answering Lisa's question. What are some other ways where you can identify the value you have relevant to the job or the business endeavor you're looking at?
Absolutely. So I'll start first with, I, like you, Teddy, am a huge lover and user of LinkedIn. And I think LinkedIn is one of the greatest research databases we have when it comes to job seeking. So one of the first things you can do if you're, kind of scratching your head and saying, I don't know where to start, go look up your job title in current open roles and see what they list there, right? It's a great, we call it a T resume, right? Where you're looking on the side and saying, okay, it says that I should be doing this, that, and the other. Modern job format, and you guys have probably seen it, is usually it has a thesis of the job, right? So we will be adding tremendous value by working with our chief, blah, blah, blah person, engaging our customers and, delivering customer delight throughout the life cycle, right? So we have a positioning statement that's supposed to make you go, ooh, okay. And then most of them will say what you will be doing in the job. And they'll list the, driving strategic change with X, Y, and Z, and building consensus with PDQ and blah, blah, blah. And then they get to the rubber meets the road. Your requirements include, and it's blah, 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 right? So read through those things and say, how similar or dissimilar does this look from my current life? That's kind of step one, because I'm a huge believer in, let's talk in the language that the market is using. And we know, so again, like in tech, for example, if Google puts something out there, it makes sense that everybody who wants to feed from Google or feed into Google is going to use something similar, or Amazon, or in any industry, right? If Coca-Cola does something, then we're going to have all the other companies, because we know the giants sometimes set the tone, but then these small to mid-sized companies are the ones that actually can, sometimes really elevate the game there. So that's step one. Go look at your job through the lens of the open job market, and then do an assessment, right? Where do I line up in terms of, hey, if they just listed 10 things, then I'm really only doing 3 things. Ooh, right, I've got a gap here, because what the market is asking for as my value and my skill, I'm actually here. Now, take a grain of salt. We know job descriptions, just like what we look for in a partner before we get married. They can be this long list of all sorts of things. And at the end of the day, do we actually marry that person? Probably not, right? So a little bit of softening on that's worthwhile. Okay, so from there, now you can do 2 things. One, think of your evidence, right? So now that you've identified what I'm doing, think of actual evidence. 2, think about, I'm in my job right now. Can I start bringing in more of these things now that I have intentionality, right? So if I see a lot that's about cross-functional collaboration, and I mostly kind of stick to my own world, is there something in my job where I can now partner with some other departments? And what might that look like? How might I do it? Or can I augment some of it with classes or certifications or other things, right? So I'm carving away at it. Then the third step is, okay, so now how do I express it? And so this is a big one, because you're saying, do I want to stay in my industry? Do I want to switch industries? Or am I looking to go somewhere else? So now you have a delta between where I am, where I want to go. And I have to think about the language that has the least amount of friction or distortion from the reader being able to see that I'm a good fit. Truthfully, that's where a lot of our clients hire us, is to help with that piece, because you have to know where you're going as well as know yourself to really be able to optimize that. Right. So you start capturing it. I'm a huge fan of, if you have contacts, get your resume in front of them. So again, you can look at LinkedIn profiles of people in that space to see what things they bring up. But, resumes are like pieces of art in which, you ask 5 people, you'll get 5 different answers. And the truth is somewhere in there, but you're looking for ways to express it most effectively in that space. And then you start to get in motion, right? Now that you have that, start trying to talk with people, send your resume. You want your LinkedIn to also look aligned, because we know 90-something% of the time, if you reach out to somebody, 1, they're going to ask for your resume, 2, they're going to look at you on LinkedIn. So if LinkedIn is not updated or speaks a totally different language, they'll go, you just customized this for my job. That doesn't mean you really want that. And LinkedIn can be tricky, because if you have a job doing one thing and you want to go somewhere else, you can't totally advertise that on LinkedIn without alerting your employer. So you have to think through, okay, what skills am I weaving in, or how do I write a bigger about that incorporates, my value proposition in this other space. And then a cover letter. The research tells us over and over again that a well-written cover letter can also help to explain why the change, why now, and why you, as well as those outreach emails.
Yeah. A quick question for you, and I deal a lot with HR folks in my work and in some outside work organizations I'm part of. Cover letters.
Yeah.
Do employers read them typically, but only if they like the resume first?
Right.
Yeah. Gotta hook them with the resume a little bit, at least at the top, to say, hey, this guy's worth my time. Let me investigate a little more, and then they'll look at the cover letter. Or do they read cover letters first? Because I don't think they do.
Well, so there was research that came out in the beginning of 2021 that really was a chicken and the egg. So what they found was, and this is the stat I use most oftenly, 70% of the time, the cover letters have an impact. Okay, well, what does that mean? It means if it's poorly written, you're kicked out of the process. It means if it's well written, I might like you more. If it's compelling, I might read your resume. Or if I read your resume and your cover letter was of equal quality, I feel good about you, right? So so it can be any of those things. They found, of the respondents that said a cover letter mattered, half of them looked at it first and then read your resume. Half of them read your resume and then looked at it. So what I tell people is, first and foremost, if you are not qualified, unless your cover letter says the CEO of your company and I are best friends, and if you don't take my meeting, he's going to call you, right? I mean, you have to actually be qualified for the role. If you're qualified for the role, why would you give up an extra opportunity to convey those qualifications with a well-written cover letter? Now, this does not mean, for most people, it is not worth their time to spend 2 hours recrafting a customized cover letter every time you're applying. I would rather you have a professional, polite, and error-free cover letter that's relevant, and spend your time doing outreach, either through your contacts or sending smart messages to the hiring managers. That, to me, is a better use of your time, because the recruiting team, as we said, right? 50-50 chance they're even going to read this cover letter, but you want, if they read it, they need to see that you can write coherently, you recognize the job for which you applied. One last caveat that came out this year is that if you have potential red flags in your resume, such as long breaks of work, such as wanting a shift from doing one thing to another, such as a change in geography, right? You can't usually write those things in your resume. The cover letter can help to dispel those. So with our clients, for example, that have been out of the market and they're coming back into the market, the cover letter will say, took a 10-year break for family priorities.
Penitentiary.
Say it again.
For penitentiary.
Yes, that was, I still remember I had a manager when I did temp staffing who said, if someone has an unexplained absence for 12 to 18 months, chances are there might be jail there. So if you can't find, and it actually was true. We had a guy who, I loved him and I was early in my career and I had a client about to hire him. And then when they did his background check, because it was a bank, they found out he was in jail. But no, for the rest of us, because of illness, caring for family members, COVID, family, right? So be honest in the cover letter, and that may help someone who is going to avoid you altogether. and thought maybe you were just not working because you didn't feel like it, maybe that will dispel that red flag and you'll get a call.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just as a personal thought here, personal thought with COVID and so many people, it's been a bloodbath. And so a lot of folks, just like back in 09, 8, 9, 10, when the Great Recession, you had to cobble together a living. And whether that was a temporary, through staffing firms, or you cobble 6, 8, 10 months here and there. And so what I'll call the career path kind of got waylaid for a while. Yeah. And now it looks like a checkerboard the last 3, 4, 5 years or longer. So that can be problematic. Do you have any advice for people who have kind of gotten sidetracked with their career? They've still been working, but it's not been in their wheelhouse. Yeah. Any thoughts on how to put forth, your best foot, so to speak, when you're trying to get back to maybe what you used to do, or maybe even try something else that's professional that you could do, but you haven't really been in a professional role most recently?
Absolutely. And it's so tricky. Yeah. So first I will tell you, and we've all met these people, there are definitely people out there that are just plain biased, right? So they'll say, or their taste level is such that I'm only going to hire someone who's currently doing this exact same job right now and pull them to the job. Okay. So for those people, you're not going to be able to do anything about, right? So there's going to be some people that are just, just like if someone's dating and they're like, I'm only going to date someone who's tall. If you're not tall, right, you may not be able to explain around that one. Now, for everybody else, I have found most people are looking to minimize the risk when they hire. So they want to hire someone they trust and they want to hire someone they respect. Okay, so what does that mean? That means if someone moved around a lot, my fear as an employer is they got discontented and then just left without a plan, or they got fired for some reason, right? And so you need to give me some explanation. I may or may not believe you, but you need to give me some explanation that helps me to not be worried about that as much, such as references from the places if you moved quickly, but they talk about, no, so-and-so was excellent. We truly wrapped up the project and I would hire them again in a second, right? And again, some of that could go on LinkedIn. Some of it can, be part of what you offer in the process of you see more movement. I'm a huge fan of state the problem before someone has to say it, right? So you're going to see from my background, I've moved a lot. Let me just be forthright and tell you why, right? So maybe I'm an artist. And I was really focusing on my art at the time, and the work that I was doing was fueling this passion. But now I've come to a place that here's how I'm handling this, and here's where I'm ready to go. Maybe I was starting my family, right? It could be any of those things. So be forthright. And then the final piece is think about, are there steps before the step you want to get to? So volunteer work or pursuing companies that are not as in demand right now as a way to get some of the stability and display tenure and display skills can go a long way. So it's a bit like going to school. If you can put yourself somewhere for a year to year and a half to restart the clock, that's of huge value. And it looked like, Randy, you had a question.
Well, I kind of did. I mean, what you said, I fully agree with, right? I get that, but so now I'm going to not disagree, but I'm going to pivot the question a little bit. What you've talked about is when you're face to face and having a chance to tell your story. And I get that. I totally get that. A bigger challenge in my view, and I think with a lot of our clients, is I need to get to the interview. And when these guys don't know who I am, how do I convey what you just said, either in a cover letter, resume, LinkedIn? How do I get to home plate with a bat in my hand? Because right now I'm sitting there on the outside of the fence looking over it saying, put me in, coach. I want to play, but nobody will talk to me. How do I get to the interview?
Yeah, Robin, before you address that, because that's powerful, let's take Cynthia's comment. And that she shared as well, is that, one of those challenges could be they were incarcerated for something, could have been a trivial thing, and they are a viable candidate, but there's a stigma on them that cannot be addressed through an application, a resume, and often not in a cover letter. So all of that applies. What your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a couple things, right? And there's also what's the politically correct thing to say, and then what actually happens in the world of work. So, right. So first and foremost, we know you shouldn't in a cover letter put things that someone could use to have bias against you, such as, mentioning that you have a family, or mentioning that you were sick, or mentioning that, you had a workers' comp case, right? Things like that, because we know there's stigmas around it. Now, some of this is you're making an assumption, I'm not going to get looked at all. So I'm writing something that may actually give me a chance of being considered, right? So I say all these things, like I said, with a grain of salt. And in my case, I've worked with people that have a range of challenges, and that's exactly why they hire me, so that we can figure out what's the right way to frame what's happened so that it's truthful, but it's not necessarily going to cause more challenges for them. Okay, that's one. But the second piece is you have to go look for employers that have a track record of openness to some of these areas. So for example, I have had clients that have, had substance abuse issues, or have had, time where they're out of the market, sometimes for, criminal reasons, sometimes, like I said, for other reasons. So we go and look for, can they find evidence of companies that may have programs that specifically work with people going through transition? Are there people on boards of organizations that deal with this, and they can do an informational conversation to say which employers may be open to this, right? So it's not a simple process, because you really do have to be resourceful in identifying what employers will be open. And the reality is the employers that will be open are the ones that are more desperate for people, right? It's just the truth. And so you go looking for, you think about the transportation industry. They cannot get enough drivers or enough people to work in the transportation industry. We have a massive shortage and a continually growing need. I'm not here to say whether someone wants to do those jobs or not, but oftentimes you have to look and say, where are there companies saying, hey, I need people for the work that I do? Those employers are typically more open to, less traditional or, less popular pathways. So I think you have to think through all of those to have that strategy.
I'm with you. And you know what? If this was easy, we could have high schoolers and elementary kids do it. It is hard work. And I'm going to talk about this. I might talk about it on Monday, Randy. And, the more you practice these activities, the better you'll get at it. And the easier it'll be for you to achieve whatever goal you're trying to achieve. So,
sure.
Rob, this is good conversation.
Can I say one more thing just on Cynthia's point, because I want to be clear about this. The concern, when there are different types of pathways, right, there are going to be more obstacles. But the most important thing is that there's honesty and transparency. And so my example of the person I mentioned who had been incarcerated, he lied on his applications about where he had been, right? Because had he been forthright about this is what I did, I would have been able to confirm whether that was even an option to get him into that role, right? So my point is not to say I'm here to pass judgment on, what these pathways are, but rather I use the adage, sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug, right? And in certain places, sometimes you're sitting in the place going, oh, I do not want to say this out loud, but I have to, because if I don't come from that place of transparency, I'm going to break down that trust and respect piece, and then I can't move forward from there. So that's where I want to be clear, right? So you want to be forthright about the challenge you're facing, and then see what options that gives you, versus hiding it then can break down any doors that are open later.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm a huge fan of transparency, appropriate transparency, knowing that there are some who are going to say, I don't want that.
Yep.
And I'm okay with that, knowing that I'm going to still be transparent. I'm going to still keep practicing and moving forward. And eventually I'll find the right conversation with the right person. So, Robin, good conversations. I really appreciate you getting up early to join us this morning. I'm satirical. I know you got up before 8 o'clock. Wrap it up. Give us a summary statement with maybe 2 really powerful statements that we could share with the audience that would help them.
Absolutely. And I do want to address, I know Cynthia has a question about, is it better to be working at a lesser job when applying for a better job? 100% yes. The human nature is we all want what other people want. So again, I use a dating analogy, which is, and we've all had the experiences, right? If you are in the swirl of things and you come to something and you look like you're with a date or whatever else, you're infinitely more interesting to other people than if you're not currently participating. So research tells us over and over again, when you are employed, you are more employable. So I encourage people all the time, if you don't have to quit, or if you can start working somewhere, do that, because again, we talk about minimizing risk. An employed person feels less risky because it means someone else is working with them. And the market is not as afraid of moving people at a year or a year and a half. So you don't have to worry about, what if I haven't been there for 3 years? That's okay. Right now, if someone's looking for somebody and they're talking to you, they're obviously okay with that tenure. But it's a great question. So key takeaways. So first and foremost is awareness. So like I said, if you have not in earnest gone and looked at your job title as a posted job and then done that gut check of, hey, how am I doing against that job description? That would be my first most important thing you can take away from it, because with awareness, you can change things, right? You can say, oh, I didn't realize my peers are doing this. Or if I'm hoping to go here, right, these are some skills that I can acquire. And oftentimes you can weave them into what you're doing. So they don't necessarily require I'm going to stop and now I have to go get an MBA and come back in. It's no, let me just weave it in. So that is huge. Secondly, if you want to make a change to a new industry or profession, be accountable to learning about it. So I'm amazed all the time. I'm told by people, for example, they'll say, oh, I want to go into customer success. Well, customer success in tech is not customer service. It's an offshoot of sales in which you're driving adoption. So if you're not coming from a tech company, you're not going to be hired for customer success. So it's imperative, if you're looking at something saying that's where I want to go, actually understand what employers for those roles are looking for, and start investigating and learning that, right? Because then again, it can help with that intentionality. Yeah. And then the third piece is actually engage with people. So I tell people all the time, your career is a full contact sport. So, you're not going to grow and develop by sort of sitting in your own world. So really look at whenever there's the right opportunities, have a conversation with them, learn more about what they do professionally, know what you're looking for next so that you can express that succinctly. And the holidays are such a great time to do that because most people have goodwill right now. The markets are good. So their stock plans are doing well. We've got relatively high employment in many factors, and coming out of COVID or still being in COVID, a lot of people do feel good about helping others. Yeah. So if you know what you're looking to accomplish and you can, share that with someone without saying like, can you give me a job? But hey, I'd love to learn more about this industry, or my longer term goal is to move into product marketing. I know you're in that space, what drew you to it, or what are some of the trends, right? So make it something that they can make it easy to be helpful for you. Yeah. You're not asking for too much, but actually make the ask, have the conversation, because you'll be better off for it.
Robin, really good stuff. Really good stuff. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Love the conversation. I actually am noodling this whole thing you just said, that when we were talking about, if you have a job, it's easier to get a job. And your analogy was if you already, got a date, it's easier to get the other date. And I'm wondering, Randy, could that be why I'm getting hit on so much at Walmart and Home Depot?
I knew that was coming. But no, it is true. And the thing is, I feel like I'm talking to my twin sister, Robin. You and I was in my mind, I'm finishing your sentences, and we're right on the same path here. And I used to be an old radio guy and made a career change once we started a family and got into recruiting. And so I was a headhunter back when fax machines were the bomb. Yes. Before email and everything else. But we're always, it was making that transition itself was a sales pitch, if you will. Yeah. What's a radio guy going to do in the recruiting field? But a lot of this is selling value. I mean, ultimately, more than one candidate can do the job. Yep. And so why do I pick candidate A over B over C? And we make decisions subjectively. We make them based on emotion for the most part, and we validate it based on logic. And we also are human. And I love the point you made. You didn't say it this way as eloquently as I am, but people like to cover their butt.
Yeah.
And, if I take a risk on somebody who doesn't have a degree and they don't do well, if I'm that, or, can't do the job, like you said, I won't have a job very long. And so you've got to do if you're a candidate and you don't have that perfect fit on paper, you have got to have an advocate or somebody who can tap somebody on the shoulder and say, hey, Teddy's got a story to tell. This guy's good. You really need to give him a closer look. And that's the beginning of that building of trust, if you will. I'll talk to Teddy. If Robin says, hey, give Teddy a look, you better believe I'll look at him.
Absolutely.
And I'll do it with a positive intent.
Yes.
And that's key. And I think a lot of people miss that. They feel like, well, I just submit my resume. I mean, they'll see that I'm really good and blah, blah, blah. And we know where that gets you.
And Robin, 88 weeks ago, he hired me.
Well, and one thing that I want to reinforce that you just said, Randy, is again, when a referral means trust is already implied. So, when you do that, to your point, now the person's saying, I want to find a way to make this person work so I don't have to meet a bunch of strangers. And then you add a virtual world where I can't sit and see if you're doing your job. Trust has become even more important. So it's even more impactful today. Great point.
Good stuff.
It is. And we had some good questions today. And if I'm sure, Teddy, if you haven't already, you put the contact info in the
I did. I dropped Robin's LinkedIn profile out there for people to follow her. Hey, dude, do you got a story?
I kind of divulged it, I guess, already. And that was the change in career for me. Look, you brought back old memories, I guess is where I'm going with this. And some of the things that you have told us today are things that I would have told candidates back then. And now in my role, I don't have the competitiveness piece because I'm not in recruiting. I'm helping people reach their goals. And one of the reasons I morphed into this kind of role was that I don't like getting lied to. I know I'm alone in that thing, but as a recruiter, you're getting lied to by candidates, right? If you only told me you'd been incarcerated,
I want to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, that, and also lied to by companies. I need to hire somebody yesterday, and now you won't take my calls. What are you, crazy? Right. And especially if I'm paid on commission, then I don't eat. And that's not a good thing. So interesting how similarities are out there. But what I loved was the asking good questions of candidates and employers so that they can arrive at a good decision that's mutually beneficial. And if I have a role in that and can make a living at it, that's a good thing. And so I really like working on the side I do, but I certainly know, like, and trust and respect folks that are doing the recruiting piece, because that's one of the toughest jobs in the world. You've got to sell the company on letting them, having you fill their opening, you sell the candidates, all that. So I can go on forever about recruiting. Robin, thank you very much. You've shared, you've dispelled rumors, myths, and our guest next week is also going to kind of pick up where you left off in some ways. But Teddy, do you have a quick story?
I do. I got two quick stories to share with you. Number one is, by the way, today is my 11th anniversary of starting my business. December 15th, 2010, I quit corporate America and started this business. And so, which is, wasn't the reason why I wore the logoed shirt, but, I just got reminded from Facebook that I started my business in 2010. So, but let me tell you the story that I have. I think it was 2002. I was working in Leesburg, Florida. Or Leesville, I can't remember it. Anyway, I had to hire 15 landscape guys. And so I put out the ad and, listed it all over the place. Back in those days, it was all newspaper ads. And I had all these people call me up. They want to come to work for me. And so I'd interview them on the phone real quick before I had a face-to-face meeting with them. And I had one guy who sort of kind of had the skills, and I felt comfortable with him. I knew it was like a little risk, but I felt a little comfortable with him. So I said to him, I said, all right, I'm going to send you to get a background check and a drug test. Is there anything on there that you think might make me concerned at all? The guy said, no, sir, I'm absolutely clean. Send him off. He came back absolutely clean, but wasn't really sure I wanted to hire him. Had another guy that I interviewed, and he had everything. Every box was checked. This dude had done it all. He'd worked in a big community that I was going to have him work in. He'd worked with all the equipment. He'd been a supervisor. He'd been a team lead. He'd been a manager. This guy checked every freaking box, and I was excited about him. And I asked him the same question. I said, now I'm going to send you off to the background check and a drug test. Is there anything on there at all that you want to tell me about now? He said, absolutely no, Mr. Burriss. We're all clean. So I sent the request to my admin, and she messaged me back, don't hire number 2, my best guy. She says he's 3.5 pages of background check. Yeah. Here's my point. And none of it was anything that was serious. If he had told me the truth, I would have hired him, because everything that he had done wrong was not contradictory to the role I wanted him to do. It was speeding, and it was, pickpocketing stuff from 25 years ago, but he lied to me. And so even though he checked every box, I hired the other guy. And so when you were talking about that and the conversation came up about, incarceration and stuff, it reminded me, be as transparent as you can be. Often you will be more successful.
Yep.
My story.
Hey, real quick, next week, I mentioned, Robin, we're going to kind of pick up where you left off. We're going to have a fellow on here named Juan Abreu. And Juan is an in-house recruiter for Spectrum, for a company that a lot of people love to hate because they're a utility. But he's an in-house recruiter. It's a high volume environment. It's a very fast-paced environment. So he's going to kind of shed some light on what life is like in his role, and what you as a candidate can do to kind of cut through the red tape and get noticed. So all good info. Teddy, I'll leave it with you. We're about out of time.
All right, Robin, again, thank you very much. Really appreciate you and your stories you brought. Randy, go off and have a great day. And everybody have a fantastic week. And we'll see you next week, which is Christmas week.
Be good. Have a great week. Thank you now.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.